Audit Symposium of a week long. I think we're glad that all of you have joined. Before we begin to the program, I'll request the backend team to kindly play the ICI motto, and I'll request all of you to put your hand on your heart.
य एष सुप्तेषु जागृति य एष सुप्तेषु जागृति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्विमाणः निर्विमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्वैत 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 एतद्वैत.
Thank you so much. So before we begin, we have our today's two speakers, Huzeifa ji and Amrendra ji. Also, we have CA Murtuza Kachwala sir, who's been the past chairman of WRC and also the chairman of the Internal Audit Committee. And we have CA Shweta Jain ma'am, the regional council member and the past secretary. May I now request CA Murtuza Kachwala sir to kindly give the opening remarks before we move ahead. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Hrudesh bhai. Good afternoon to everyone. Let me first, I am this year the chairman for the Internal Audit and Management Accounting Committee at WIRC. Hrudesh Pankania is the vice chairman for this committee and very dynamic, and he is like been very supportive. And we also did one Internal Audit conclave where we had 500 plus people. And today again, it is encouraging to see that we got 300 people online joining for this symposium. Let me also recognize presence of Shweta Jain, past secretary of WRC. Again, very dynamic, very active, and she is always there whenever any need, any program is there. Let me thank both the speakers for today. CA Huzeifa Unwala, he is going to cover the standard on internal audit for us in the first 1 hour. And what does it mean? What are the various standards and how do we understand them? And again, then we have CA Amrendra Sinha. He is the mass head, management assurance services at Adani Green. He handles the whole Adani Green business. And again, he is going to talk to us on how do they practically implement the auditing, the internal audit standards in the day-to-day life in such a large group. So I welcome both of them. I thank them from the bottom of my heart for accepting this invitation. And in the next 5 days, Monday to Friday, every day we meet 5 to 7, 2 hours, total 10 hours, and we'll cover every aspect of the internal audit from documentation to sampling to analytic procedure to field work to planning and to reporting and to stakeholder management. So I really thank again all the 300 of you, and I can see almost 176 people already join in. So it is really encouraging, and thank you very much. And Hrudesh bhai, over to you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Murtuza sir, for first of all designing this amazing program and people joining in mass numbers. I'll now request CA Shweta Jain ma'am, the regional council member, to kindly introduce our first speaker for the session.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hrudesh. All the dignitaries who I can see on the screen and all the participants. A very good afternoon to all of you. It's really a pleasure to introduce such an eminent personality, Huzeifa Unwala sir. He's a founder and senior partner in JHS and Associate LLP, FCA, CISA, plus 25 years of experience, and his area of expertise is governance, risk, and regulatory compliances. He has delivered client engagement in India and internationally in Middle East and USA. Also, he is associated with a private limited company serving as a trustee director to assist the shareholder in completing voluntary liquidation of the company in India. also associated with a charitable trust in the capacity of a treasurer on a voluntarily basis. He has made several notable contributions at CNAG, IIA, ICAI, BCAS, ISACA, CII, and other public and professional forums as a faculty, author, and research efforts. So his contribution include assisting ICAI in updating the technical publication on statutory audit of bank branches, prevention of money laundering, and co-authored Enterprises Risk Management study material for the CA final exams. Sir has served as a special invitee on the task force set up by ICAI to launch the nationwide initiative of Vittiya Gyan Abhiyan. Sir, we welcome you at the platform of WIRC and really thank you so much for accepting the invitation. Also, thanks to our second speaker, Amrendra Sinha ji. Would like to, of course, congratulate and thanks to this committee chairman and vice chairman, Murtaza Kachwala sir and Rudesh Pankhania for conducting this webinar, this series, which is, I can say, is a talk of the town nowadays, internal audit, because a lot of opportunities chartered accountants are looking for in this internal audit area. So with this, thank you so much, Rudesh, and over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Shweta ma'am. I'll request Huzeifa ji first to kindly take over the session.
Thank you, Ridesh, and thank you, Shweta. And I would like to thank Murtaza Bhai for organizing such a wonderful series on internal audit, on the subject of internal audit, where it's going to be a practical mix of theory as well as industry practices from leading personalities. And, you know, my co-panelist today, as I understand the format, is going to share the practical aspects of implementing whatever the standards have to recommend. And I will be laying down the conceptual framework in the first 60 minutes. So wonderful efforts, Murtaza Bhai. Thanks for organizing and inviting all of us. You have been a continuing doyen on the subject of internal audit, and you know the quality of seminars that you are bringing out are simply amazing and
Thank you,
world-beating
sir.
class.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my compliments to the entire WRC team. So thanks for inviting. Now I'll just start my session and my slideshow. I will share my slides. I hope the screen is visible to all of you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for the confirmation. So I'm going to be covering the 100 series on standards on internal audit, which comprises of nature of assurance, risk management, internal controls, governance, as well as compliance with regulations and laws of the country. So these are the 4-5 standards on internal audit that I would be covering today. What I've done is that I've prepared an executive summary of all these standards on internal audit, simplifying these standards into small nuggets of insights and information, followed by some level of quizzing and question answers to test the knowledge of the participants in terms of whether I have been successfully communicating all the messages that are enshrined in the standards on internal audit that are going to be discussed with all of you. So if time permits, we will go to the question and answer session along with the quiz session towards the end. So first, let me start by covering standard on internal audit 110, which is on nature of assurance. As internal audit practitioners, always there is an expectation from the management side that we would like to have a firm opinion from the internal audit practitioner, whether the internal auditor is a partner or a member of the corporate industry, like being the head of internal audit and so forth. The audit committee and the board always expect some kind of a firm opinion on the subject of internal audit. To facilitate this, the institute has designed Nature of Assurance SIA 110, where it talks about what are the steps that the practitioner has to take to facilitate a nature of assurance engagement. So this standard applies to all the internal audit assurance assignments that require an internal audit practitioner to express an opinion to enhance the confidence of the assurance users about the outcome of the internal audit activity. So the scope of the standard is that it requires the internal audit practitioner to express an opinion, a firm opinion, to enhance the confidence of the assurance users. Now, who are the assurance users? They are the board of directors, the audit committee, the various process owners in the organization that consume the internal audit outcome. These are all users of the internal audit report. Now, the assignment is targeted towards them, and the standard further says that this is not only applicable to practicing chartered accountants, but all practitioners of internal audit. So say if it is from another stream other than CA, could be a company secretary, could be a CMA, could be anybody else who's practicing the subject of internal audit, could take guidance from this amazing standard, which encapsulates the steps that the internal audit practitioner has to take up. Now, what it defines is that, what qualifies as a assurance or as an opinion assignment on the subject of internal audit. So there are very simplistically put 2 or 3 litmus tests that will enable you to decide whether your output is relevant for creating an internal audit assurance opinion or no. So what are the qualifiers the standard talks of? There are 2 or 3 specific qualifiers that the standard talks of. First is that the management is expecting you to write a report along with an internal audit opinion. So your opinion has to be expressed in writing. That is the first qualifier. So what you see on the slide on the left-hand side of the corner of the slide, where it shows as yes, and under the yes box, you will find 2 or 3 qualifying statements. The first one is that the internal audit practitioner has to express an opinion in writing through an internal audit report. So if you are giving an internal audit view or point of view in an audit committee, which is a verbal discourse, but not supported by a written opinion, that it will not qualify as your as an internal audit output or as an opinion. It has to be necessarily backed up by a report in writing, wherein there is a para on the opinion on the subject matter. Secondly, you should be giving a conclusive outcome, such as either a certification on effectiveness of controls, like we give, say, in case of internal financial controls or any other matter. We will get into some practical examples on the next slide. So there should be a conclusive outcome through the internal audit report. That is very, very much clearly mentioned in the standard. So if the internal audit report is a general report just giving ratings or observations or findings, it does not qualify as an assurance assignment under the SIA 110. The third qualifier is that there should be evaluation of subject matter against a predefined criteria. So again here, for example, if you are asked to do a management review on GST compliances for an organization, so GST related compliance and checklist will become the critical subject matter on which you have to base your opinion. And there will be a detailed breakdown of the GST compliance in the form of a checklist or a risk and control matrix, which is known as a predefined criteria. So that is the third qualifier. So just to summarize quickly, the key elements for creating an opinion where you have to form the opinion as part of the internal audit output or report. First, it should be in writing. Second, it should have a conclusive opinion para and an outcome where you're clearly stating what your opinion is on the subject matter. Third is that the subject matter or the scope of work should be well defined. And alongside the scope of work and subject matter, you should have a predefined checklist or a criteria which will help you benchmark your effort so that you can come out with an effective opinion. And where there is existence of all these 3 qualifiers, you can then call that opinion or that assignment as a assurance assignment under SIA 110. Now, typically, assurance assignment has a high risk and high liability involved in it. It is quite similar to a statutory audit, where the statutory auditor has to form an opinion, which is opinion on correctness, accuracy, truth, fairness, etc. Something similar to that. when an internal auditor is asked to give a fairness opinion, an opinion on the accuracy or precision of the subject matter, he will use nature of assurance SIA 110. Now, what does not constitute an assurance engagement under the internal audit activities? So you see on the right-hand corner of the slide, there is a no box. Under the no box, there are again 3 or 4 items that are listed. A simple internal audit report that we do day in, day out on a monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, on a yearly basis, which does not give out any opinion, will not be considered as an assurance assignment. Any internal audit report that simply provides a rating on the observations and findings, such as high, medium, low, a red, amber, and yellow, green kind of a rating, itself does not lead us to calling it as an assurance assignment under SIA nature of assurance. And very clearly, if it is simply review of statutory filings and some compliance related review specific to the statutory filings, unless there is a specific requirement in writing for giving an opinion, it does not constitute again a assurance assignment. So this is in a nutshell a summary of what constitutes an assurance assignment under the SIA 110 nature of assurance. Now let's move to certain examples here. What are the key elements of a assurance assignment? So as I mentioned, there is a subject matter and there is a predefined criteria. Now, what are the examples of a subject matter? It could be the cash flow or the liquidity health of an organization. It could be the accuracy of the operational output, performance of a unit, a factory. It could be application controls. It could be status of compliance effectiveness. It could be internal financial controls, or it could be any specific review relating to code of conduct of the organization, or procure to pay processes, or order to cash, where the management desires a written opinion from the internal auditor along with a predefined criteria. Now, the predefined criteria is a measurement matrix, very similar to an internal audit checklist or a risk and control metrics, or say there is a ISO standard or a COBIT standard which needs to be benchmarked, or the ICI guidance note on internal financial control that needs to be benchmarked. So definitively there has to be a predetermined and predefined criteria supporting the subject matter, which will be used as a benchmark by the internal auditor's office to form an opinion that may lead to a conclusive outcome. So these are some key elements as far as the IA assurance assignment is concerned. To conclude on the SIA 110 nature of assurance, the concluding sections of the standard talk about the level of assurance that the internal audit practitioner is going to give. There are 2 specific levels of assurance that are recommended by the standard. The first is a reasonable assurance, and the second is a limited purpose of assurance that can be provided by the internal audit practitioner. As far as reasonable assurance is concerned, that definitely reduces the risk of the practitioner as compared to an certification or absolute kind of assurance. This assurance is to be provided on the whole subject matter. When it comes to limited assurance, it can be provided on part of the subject matter. It need not be provided on the whole subject matter itself. In both the cases of assurance that the internal audit practitioner has to give as a conclusive outcome, he has to use his professional judgment. Ultimately, that is the most valuable part in giving the opinion. It need not only be a tick in the box exercise comparing 2 sets, the subject matter with the predefined criteria to reach a conclusion, but the management is looking forward to the professional judgment of the internal audit practitioner. So while forming his point of view, he is very much well within his rights to give some subjective opinion as well. The levels of assurance prescribed by the SIA definitely are very useful to the internal audit practitioner because it will help reduce the risk and liability of the practitioner. And finally, in terms of giving any firm assurance opinion as part of internal audit activity, the internal audit practitioner should comply with all the relevant ethical, competency, and independence requirements. It means that there should be zero conflict of interest. Internal auditor should be confident that he'll be able to provide an opinion on the basis of his experience, wisdom, and competence. If he doesn't have, then he should hire the capabilities of subject matter experts and ensure that he is completely independent. So this is a summary of nature of assurance, SIA 110, in terms of internal audit assurance assignment that requires an internal audit practitioner to express an opinion to enhance the confidence of the assurance users about the outcome of the internal audit activity. Now we'll move on to the next standard, SIA 120, on the subject of internal audit. So this standard SIA 120, I would say, is the most significant and critical standard in the family of SIA, because we deal with the subject of internal controls very routinely while we do internal audit activities. But we seldomly recognize the concept of internal controls the way it has been enumerated in SIA 120, with the kind of examples that have been given in the SIA 120 and the responsibility of the practitioner as well as that of the management. Many times while executing internal audit assignments, we falsely believe that we are the owners of internal controls, and we tend to make certain statements that are actually beyond our duty of span of duty as an internal auditor, or even duty of care towards our clients. So the standard very clearly lays down the responsibility of a practitioner and that of a management, and what the practitioner can do on the subject of internal control and cannot do on the subject of internal control. This standard applies to all IA activities conducted where internal controls are subject of internal audit review and are being assessed, evaluated, and reported upon. So given the scope of this SIA, it's quite likely that we will end up using this SIA for all the internal audit assignments, because any internal audit activity that we take up will certainly have the element of internal controls and control activities and monitoring activities, and we will have to review these activities as part of our internal audit reporting framework. Therefore, this standard applies to all the internal audit activities per se. Now, we routinely know the definition of internal control. What is internal control? Internal control, as defined by SIA, qualifies to include the activities that are enlisted on the left-hand side of the slide as to what qualifies internal control. And that definition is extended by the Companies Act 134(5), where it gives the definition of internal financial control. So let's quickly look at the conceptual and definitional aspects of internal control. First is, internal control is a risk mitigation step taken to strengthen the organization systems and processes, as well as help to prevent and detect errors and irregularities. What it means, simply it means that any activity that would prevent a risk from occurring. A risk could be in the form of an error or fraud, or it could be in the form of a material misstatement, or it could be any outage or any event that would cause or have the potential to cause loss to an organization. And any activity that is done to prevent such things from happening are called internal controls. And internal controls are like policies, standard operating procedures, organizational structures, practices followed by customary practices on internal controls followed by organization. What are internal control activities? Internal control activities are actual steps of mitigation, such as the process of review, approvals, physical counting, etc., are referred to as internal control activities. So the risk mitigation steps are internal controls, whereas the actual steps that are implemented are known as internal control activities. Entity level controls, process level controls, information technology general controls are all family of internal controls. Entity level controls are broad-based controls. They are also called as mother of internal controls. SA 315 mentions the term control and refers to any aspects of one or more of the components of internal control. That means control environment, risk assessment, monitoring, and such activities are referred to as internal controls. So it's a very wide gamut of activities and definition. Now let's look at 134.5 of the Companies Act, again mentioned under the SIA 120. Policies and procedures adopted by the company for ensuring the orderly and efficient conduct of its business, including adherence to company's policies, safeguarding of its assets, the prevention and detection of frauds and errors, the accuracy and completeness of the accounting records, and the timely preparation of reliable financial information. So all these things put together constitute internal financial controls. There is a pictorial representation of the concept of internal controls that encompasses all the definitions and makes it little more exciting for us to look at the conceptual framework of internal controls. This pictorial definition representation has been taken from SI 120 internal controls, which talks about internal controls over financial reporting, operational controls, internal financial controls. They all constitute process level controls. Entity level controls is part of the overall control environment. All put together constitute internal controls, and everything put together from an overarching perspective will come into the internal control system of the organization. Now, whose responsibility it is to implement this internal control system? It is squarely the responsibility of the management to design and implement, to ensure adequacy and effectiveness, to ensure there are annual certifications around the subject of internal control systems, and that the systems are robust and are continually improved. So these are the 4 specific responsibilities cast upon the management. What is the job of the internal auditor as per the SIA? The job of the internal auditor is to review the adequacy and effectiveness of the internal control system and the internal controls of the organization. If the internal auditor plays a role in defining and implementing the internal control system, then he or she is conflicted from the process of reviewing the internal control system of the organization. So the question of independence will set in that kind of a scenario and situation. So overall, the management is responsible for ensuring adequacy, effectiveness of internal control systems, and the internal auditor's job is to verify the adequacy of design, operative effectiveness of the controls, and to review the continuous improvement in the internal control system of the organization. Now, while doing the IA responsibilities, the internal auditor has got a choice whether he issues an assurance opinion or a ratings opinion. Now, that depends on the terms of reference, depends on the expectations of the management as to what the management and the audit committee desires. If it is an assurance opinion, then we have discussed it in SIA 110. There has to be a subject matter and there has to be a predefined criteria basis which the internal auditor will form an opinion. If it's not an assurance engagement, then the internal auditor will simply put up a findings report, observation report, or a ratings report where he is doing an audit rating and giving confidence to the management. Here again, the library, globally published best practices library could be looked upon by the internal auditor while creating the internal control review engagement and while he's planning the entire activities. Libraries that are available under the COSO framework. We move on to SIA 130. SI 130 is on the subject of risk management. So here again, the SIA is very clearly articulating certain concepts and certain theories that will protect the interest of the internal auditor, will restrict the liability of the internal auditor, and will help the internal auditor perform a good, high quality job while reviewing the risk management framework of the organizations. So let's understand 130 little bit better. Where it applies to all risk-based internal audit activities, and also where risk management framework is a subject matter of an audit and is being assessed, evaluated, and reported upon. Now, it's quite commonplace in listed and large specified entities where risk management is mandatorily implemented as a discipline, and internal auditors are called upon to do an independent review of the effectiveness of the risk management framework. So in all those situations, this SIA will help the internal auditor do a quality output and do a uniform output. And also the standard mentions that irrespective of the fact where risk management framework exists or doesn't exist, internal auditor has to do his duty through a risk-based approach. Now, risk-based internal audit approach, again, the institute has got a lot of technical guidance. The regulators such as Reserve Bank of India, SEBI, IRDA, all have come out in support of risk-based internal audit methodologies and the way in which internal audit have to be executed. And the standard only encompasses all these things and provides a broad framework in which the internal auditor should do his activity. What qualifies as a risk management framework and what are the responsibilities of the management? That is clearly articulated and defined by the standard. So there are three specific components that are recommended by the standard as within the responsibility framework of the management. And there are five steps or procedures mentioned in the standard that the management could use in terms of implementing this framework on risk management. First is the management is responsible to design and implement a risk management framework to enhance organizational ability around strategy, leadership, culture, structure, competence, monitoring, and processes. So when we talk of the subject of risk management, the standard is quite elaborate and encompasses strategy, leadership, performance, cultural aspects of organization, competence, monitoring processes. It talks about entity-wide activities to manage organizational risks executed through enterprise risk approach. So it should be necessarily an enterprise-wide approach. It cannot be a siloed approach in implementing enterprise risk management. And third is that there should be a series of steps to take on continuous basis, taken on continuous basis to identify threats, vulnerabilities, assessing those threats and vulnerabilities for severity, likelihood, prioritizing and monitoring them for actions to minimize negative outcomes. So these are the three primary components from a risk management framework perspective that fall within the responsibility of the management. Now, how does the management implement this framework as recommended by the standard? Again, is first is to develop a policy. Second is to develop a system that is robust enough to identify what are the various risks, factors, vulnerabilities, and threats to the organization, and in particular, what are the primary and major risks and threats that threaten the existence of the organization. System of risk management that is robust and defensible, proper risk management plans, and finally a risk management committee to oversee and implement the risk management framework within the organization. So these are some qualifiers for a comprehensive risk management framework implementation as enumerated in the SIA 130 risk management. Now, what are the responsibilities of the internal auditor as prescribed by the standard? First is again the choice as prescribed in the engagement letter given by the management, whether the internal auditor will look at the adequacy and effectiveness of risk management practices, either in the form of assurance opinion or a ratings opinion. ensure that the carry forward and implementation of IA activities are all risk-based internal audit activities as per the SIA framework. Internal auditor should be independent of the risk management framework's implementation. He or she should not assume any role in the risk management activities of the organization. So should be truly independent. That is what the standard prescribes and requires. Here again, the standard has clearly outlined the fact that while forming an opinion, the risk-based internal auditor, the practitioner has to and can rely upon certain self-certifications taken up by the management. So self-certifications in terms of, say if there is a procurement risk and control matrix, the procurement head has to give a self-assessed output on the risk universe of procurement and the effectiveness of controls around the subject of procurement to the internal auditor. And the internal auditor can form his opinion on the basis of the compliance or control self-assessment done by the process owner. So here the standard clearly comes out in defense of the internal audit practitioner. So if one looks at the entire wordings and the manner in which these standards have been designed and implemented and prescribed, if they are implemented in substance and spirit, it will really help all the internal audit practitioners immensely in protecting their audit liability as well as reducing the audit risk. Each standard has a specific prescription on the internal audit responsibility. And if this responsibility can form part of the engagement letter of the internal audit practitioner, it will go a long way in protecting the interest of the internal audit fraternity. Management responsibility is to design and implement the risk management framework, ensure there is risk trainings and ownership, risk appetite is properly defined, risk communication, adequacy and effectiveness of annual disclosures, and continuous improvement of policies and procedures. So look at the entire framework in entirety and then give out a assurance opinion or independent internal auditors report, either a ratings report on the subject of risk management framework. So this was SIA 130. Now we move on to SIA 140, that is on the subject of governance. Now, the subject of corporate governance and governance is a very large subject in terms of the onus of activities to be done by the board and the management responsibilities. But the standard SIA 140 very crisply and nicely summarizes what the corporate governance framework of an organization should have, what are the theoretical and conceptual elements which the internal audit practitioner should look at in terms of governance activities and framework, where the subject matter of audit is governance activities, and it needs to be assessed, evaluated, and reported upon. So again, here the standard has very clearly outlined two critical elements and components forming part of the governance activities of the organization. What qualifies as governance activities? So while you are executing internal audit, you should be aware of the fact that what you're commenting upon is an internal control, a risk management activity, or a governance activity. So once you start practicing this level of disclosures in your internal audit report, automatically the quality and the output will go to the next level. So as far as governance activities are concerned, what they comprise of? They comprise of the value set of the organization, the ethics and code of conduct of the organization, various agreements that protect stakeholder interests within the organization, especially the minority interest stakeholders, structure of the organization, delegation of authority, for example, within the structure, competence, monitoring, transparency, and communication. These all activities put together targeted towards organizational achievement of organization objectives. They could be budgets, goals, long-term, short-term objectives within the organization. All these activities would go towards constituting governance activities of the organization. What are the internal controls that can come within the governance activity framework? So the standard talks about entity level controls. Entity level controls, which are the highest form of controls, like say a financial statement closure procedure, a budget within the organization, a code of conduct, accounting policy. All these are examples of entity level controls, which are highest forms of controls within the organization. And this come within the family of governance activities. So whenever the internal auditor practitioner has to review such activities, he or she can bucket them as governance activities, and the level of rating itself will go on the higher side. Because for a governance activity, internal auditor need not rate it as a low risk item. It has to necessarily go as a critical or high risk item, because these are matters of integrity, these are matters of governance for the organization. So here the standard clearly distinguishes and outlines what qualifies as a governance activity. What are the responsibilities of the board of directors and management? Assist the company in implementing best governance practices. The standard writes the term best governance activities. It also says that it applies to a set of executives and a group of executives, and the entity has to monitor the effectiveness of the entity level controls and governance practices, continuously improve and make changes for improvements of governance activities. So this is in a nutshell the overall responsibility of the board and the management. Now, what are the responsibilities of the internal auditor? Here again, to do an independent review on the governance activities, which is supported by risk-based outputs. Internal auditor should not assume any governance role under this SIA, specifically mentioning about certain examples of governance activities could relate to drafting of policies, drafting of procedures, drafting of code of conduct, implementing, training, communicating. Internal auditor should not ideally take part in such activities. If he or she takes part in such activities, then obviously is conflicted or is not independent in terms of his review work. What constitute corporate governance activities? In a summary, activities of board and committees, legal regulatory systems, policies, procedures, transparency aspects of the organization, hierarchy within the organization structure, and internal controls. And summarizing the management responsibility again on design and implementation of systems of governance, training, ownership, communication, adequacy and effectiveness of annual disclosures, certificates issued by the CEO, by the board of directors, director responsibility statements, robustness and continuous improvement of governance activities. So this was the summary on 140 on governance activity. Now I come to the last SIA 150, compliance with laws and regulations. This is again a very interesting and comprehensively written SIA, very useful for all the internal audit practitioners, because compliance reviews, legal reviews, regulatory reviews are all forming part of scope of work of the internal auditor. So here, what constitutes a compliance law and regulatory activity? It's critical that the internal auditor recognizes and appreciates a CLR activity, and this activity is relied upon by not only the board, the audit committee, but also immensely from the statutory auditor's office. First thing that they check in the internal audit report is the CLR activity, that is compliance with laws and regulations, and what the internal auditor has to say about that, because this more often than not leads to a adverse opinion on the statutory auditor's part. So any legal or compliance activity that is a non-compliance and reported in the internal auditor gets immediately gets immediately picked up by the statutory auditor's office. Now, what are the three elements? First, it talks about the framework, structure, systems, and processes. Here again, the standard talks about the board and management's responsibility to implement a best-in-class compliance framework. A framework that is an automated framework, a framework that is capable of generating alerts, compliance alerts in terms of timelines, in terms of compliance breaches, etc. Everything. So if one reads the standard carefully, it becomes a ready-made material for us to not only form our opinion on CLR activities, but also to clearly benchmark against the requirements of the standard and what the management and board needs to put in place and make an internal auditor's comment in terms of an area of improvement. So the standard talks about the responsibility of the management in terms of design and implementation of compliance framework to build organizational abilities around adherence to the value code, ethics, stakeholder interest, strategy, leadership, culture, structure, competence, and monitoring. Again, very similar to what is mentioned in the governance activities. So does the CLR activity and framework to be implemented by the board and management comprise of a similar kind of a disclosure here. In addition to all these elements, it also mentions about transparency. Assign compliance responsibilities, maintain a database of compliance requirements. So assignment of compliance responsibilities, again, a key aspect within the SIA 150. It also talks about whether the directors have devised proper system to ensure compliance with the provisions of all applicable laws and systems are adequate, operating effectively. It also talks about a subject matter expert company secretary. So here again, the internal auditor can shelter himself and look at the adequacy of the reporting done by the company secretary. The standard here clearly outlines that the company secretary the function of the company secretary includes to report to the board about compliance with the provisions of the Companies Act and the rules made thereunder and other laws applicable to the company. So company secretary is a subject matter expert and he or she is duty bound to give a detailed disclosure on the level of compliance is achieved by the organization and by the management on not only Companies Act, but all other applicable laws as well. So here the internal auditor, as required by the standard, can actually ask for this kind of a disclosure from the company secretary. Now, this standard applies to all activities conducted and where compliance activities and framework is a subject matter of an audit and is being assessed, evaluated, and reported upon. More often than not, as I said earlier, that always compliance and law-related activities form part of the scope of internal auditor's job. The standard requires that the internal auditor should document the terms of reference and the subject matter very clearly. I'll give you one example: compliance with the GST Act or compliance with the Income Tax Act may not be a sufficient line in the scope of work, but specific activities to be accomplished as part of the internal audit output should be defined in the scope of work. So when we talk of GST, does it relate to the filings done and accuracy, timeliness, comprehensiveness of the GST filings done by the management? Does it relate to input tax credit aspects within GST? Does it relate to any pending demands and so forth? Likewise, for income tax, whether it pertains to TDS provisions, it pertains to several other compliances under the Income Tax Act. So no more we have the liberty of using vague language as part of our scope of work or internal audit output. The standards demand a lot of precision and consistency of wordings in our engagement letters as well as our internal audit output. What is the responsibility of the internal auditor? To evaluate and assess compliance areas, activities, processes, and systems, to provide an independent assurance or ratings report in the form of internal audit output, make a risk-based internal audit output, and should not be conflicted, should be independent. And the responsibility of the management is to design and implement systems of compliance, of governance, provide training, ownership, communication, provide annual disclosures as required under specific laws, and the compliance system should be automated, digitalized, robust, and should have continuous improvements. So this is as far as the standard on CLR is concerned. Let me end this standard with critical questions that arise on plain reading of SIA 150, compliance with laws and regulations. So there are 6 questions that I have carved out from the language of the standards, what the internal auditor should verify as part of the CLR review activities. First is whether the organization has devised a compliance framework that is consistent with best in class and globally recognized framework. So best in class and globally recognized framework is part of the language of the standard. Whether the organization sets the tone at the top with supporting messages. So does the board, the audit committee, and the executive management, the process owners, sets the tone at the top with supporting messages, again coming out of the standard. Whether organization has implemented compliance structure and compliance ownership, assignment of specific compliance responsibilities, whether the organization has identified all the laws and risks associated and the importance and priority of all the compliance risks, whether there is regular trainings, and whether the systems of compliances are automated, they are comprehensive, they regularly track non-compliances and maintain evidences of compliances. So these are the 6 aspects that the standard clearly mentions as a responsibility of the internal auditor to evaluate and for the management to have implemented. So this is friends, an executive summary on standards 110, 120, 130, 140, and 150. Now, quickly, we will go to the quiz part of my presentation. And there are 10, 12 questions. They are true and false. And you have to quickly get yourself to look at the screen and take the Mentimeter code and do the answers. So I'll just switch my screen. I'll stop sharing for a moment. Go to the Mentimeter pages. Is my screen visible to everybody?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, great. So can you see the use code?
We can see the implementing SIS means sheet.
Yes. So if you use the use code, go to menti.com and people can start answering. So implementing SIA means better quality output, more time investment, both or none.
I'll request the participants to kindly use the menti.com as sir has mentioned, and please kindly use the code and please click on accordingly.
So once you join menti.com and use this code, then you don't have to re-enter it again and again. And I'm glad to see that there are so many responses coming in already. We have topped more than 50, moving to 40, moving to 50 responses already. So out of 247. So great. I think people have got the gist of the standards, and I'm glad that they're replying that it will lead to a better quality output. Certainly, use of SIA will lead to better quality output for all of us. So because of paucity of time, I'm moving to the next question now. So whether implementing SIA provides absolute assurance, reasonable assurance, low assurance, 100% assurance, or none. Great. So here also, I think the majority is clearly the yellow bar that we see, reasonable assurance. So implementing SIAs will help us reduce our audit risk and our audit liability and will enable us to provide a reasonable assurance to the management. Excellent. We'll move to the next question. Opinion expressed in writing through an internal audit report qualifies as an assurance assignment, true or false? So the blue bar wins here again. It's true that opinion expressed in writing through an IA report qualifies as an assurance assignment. Great. Defined scope of work and defined measurement criteria are the key elements of an IA assurance assignment. True or false? True. Great. We'll move to the next one. Actual steps of mitigation of risk such as approval is referred to as a control activity. True or false? Yes, the answer is true. Any steps that are actually implemented, like a physical count, review, or approval, is classified as a control activity as per the SIA on internal controls. So this is true. Code of conduct is a process level control. True or false? So clearly this is false. The yellow graph wins here. Code of conduct is a governance activity. It is an entity level control, not a process level control. Can a assurance assignment be changed to a non-assurance assignment? This is a bit tricky, but the wordings come out from the standard again on nature of assurance. So generally what happens is that a assurance assignment does not change. It does not change. However, if the underlying circumstances change, then you are permitted to change the nature of assurance assignment from an assurance assignment to a non-assurance assignment. However, the evidence that has been gathered while you have taken the assignment as an assurance assignment cannot be disregarded. I will give you an example. Let's look at a practical situation where the organization has implemented a new HR application and you have been requested to do a data migration review and provide a certification or an assurance assignment that the data that is migrated to the new version of the HR application is correct and is accurate. Now you took it up as a certification or as an assurance assignment, but midway the management encounters certain bugs in the new version or new system and has to shut down the system for some maintenance work for say 7 days, and you are requested to issue a report on a as is where is basis without concluding your entire assurance activities. So in that situation, you will not be able to form an opinion, a reasonable opinion. So you may request the management that please change the nature of assurance engagement to a non-assurance engagement, because it is of your internal problems or bugs that the data migration assignment has to come to an end. Now the management says, okay, we allow you to change it. So we will come together again after 1 month. So after 1 month, when the assignment restarts, what you're supposed to do is to first check all the evidences that you've gathered in the phase 1 of the assignment and whether that is still relevant to the new assignment. And if you find it relevant, then it has to find a mention in your report. So that is what the standard says, that only under very occasional or rare circumstances, because of some changes initiated by the management, you are allowed to change the nature of assurance. Otherwise, you have to continue. But having changed the terms of reference, you still cannot disregard the original evidence that has been collected. So the answer to this is yes. I think majority of us have got it wrong. You can change, provided that you carry forward the original evidence. Capturing and maintenance of comprehensive database of risk is responsibility of auditor. True or false? It is the responsibility of the management. The internal auditor has to review the adequacy and effectiveness of the database of risk. Auditor to ensure competence and expertise in the area of risk management. True or false? Yes, it is true. Auditor has to possess competence and expertise to review the risk management process of our organization. Is audit committee responsible to appoint risk officer and assign risk to a specific risk owner? True or false? It looks like a divided house on this question, but the correct answer is false. The audit committee does governance activities. It cannot involve itself in assigning specific risk to risk owners. That is the task of the executive management of the company. So the question is false. In a risk management related assurance opinion, should the auditor mandatorily receive certification on self-compliance? True or false? Again, here I think majority of us are getting it wrong. The answer is true. In a risk management related assurance opinion, the auditor should necessarily attempt and obtain to receive a certification on self-compliance, because the subject matter of risk management is complex and is owned by the management. An internal auditor, although should possess competence, knowledge, capability, and experience to comment, however, is not a risk management practitioner the way the management is. So the standard prescribes that while issuing an opinion on the subject of risk management adequacy and effectiveness, internal auditor should receive certification on self-compliance on risk management by the executive management. So that's about it, friends, from my side. I have completed my presentation along with the quiz part, and I hand it over back to Videsh.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much, Huzeifa ji. I think that was an excellent the way you took us over to entire nitty-gritties, including the Q&A. So thank you so much for giving your time and detailed explanation on each of those essays. Thank you so much, very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Videsh. If there are any questions, I will stay on. If there are any questions.
There are some, I think, some questions which were asked in the Q&A, sir. I think that's done, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay, okay. So, guys, we will wait
Okay.
for a. Yeah.
Should I exit then?
Yes, yes, sir. I'll just see if there are any questions more. Yes, sir.
All right.
Sure.
Okay. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Huzaifa,
everyone.
sir. Thank
Bye.
you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you for calling me. Bye.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Participants, so that was a wonderful session by Huzaifa sir. We have another interesting session now to continue by Amrendra Sinha ji. Amrendra Sinha ji, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and joining us to talk about Sir. Sir is the Chief Audit Executive at Adani Green Energy Limited, an ACMA from ICMAI, PGDBM, the first rank in finance and the IT, a certified internal auditor from CIA, IIA USA, CISA from ISACA USA, CISM from ISACA, ISO 27001 lead auditor, leadership and general management course done from the ISB Hyderabad. A finance and audit professional with 22 plus years of experience, financial controller and head FNA Tata Steel Limited. He's been CAE of Tata Technologies, spearheaded key projects with McKinsey in cost optimization, winners at the IIA India competition in 2019 and 2023. I think an excellent, it's going to be the session. We welcome you, Amrendra ji, for the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Hitesh, and thank you to all the WIRC members, participants. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me share my presentation if I can. Let me try. Okay. Let me know if once you are able to see this.
Sir, it's visible.
Great. So good evening, friends. I know most of the things are already done. So let me see if I can do justice to your time. And so you have already know, by the time you have already know now that you already know that what is the SIA standards and all. So my first question is that how many people apply for the CA exam? You can write in the chat box and I will let you know that why I'm asking these questions. Okay. And then you also try to understand that how many finally clear the exams. And the reason being asked these questions is that while the theory and all the materials are already in place, how difficult the deployment is. So you have complete CA syllabus in your hand, you know all the books, author, everything. But even then, if you see the CA result, how many people pass? That's the difficulty of your implementation plan, right? Great. So the success of any governance process is effectively dependent on the implementations. There is no dearth of knowledge. You can go to Google, Wikipedia, syllabus, anywhere. But how effectively you can implement it, that's the real fruit of the NES standards. Okay. So now, since by now you know what the standard says, what the standard means, I will just tell you in brief the practical part. So SIA 110. You all know that this is regarding the type of assurance, how you should nature of assurance. Once you know that there are two types of assurance assignment and non-assurance assignments, how do you secure to proceed if it is assurance assignment? For this, you must have an approved engagement letter. from the audit partner. There are three partners that audit the person who is giving you the assignments. If it is from the management, you must have writing clearly mandate. And if you want to outsource it, then you must have a clear-cut engagement that is this a assurance assignment or it's a normal assignment. Within assurance assignment also you need to mention, is it reasonable assurance or limited assurance? Because unless you have these things in place, you will not be able to justice with the standards. So the key point in deployment here is that you must be having approved document and engagement letter if you are co-sourcing, that what the nature of assurance is telling. This is the deployment part, because it's not a one-party relations. Unless you have an approved document, how you will have a three-party relationship in future if something happens? And what are the three parties? Who are the three parties? Is you, the person getting audited, and all other users of your report. Okay. So what is to learn here? First thing, all the assignments should be documented based on the nature. Is it assurance assignment or non-assurance assignment? If assurance assignment, then reasonable assurance or limited assurance. Okay. Coming back to the next slide, if you go, that is on the internal control. So what is internal controls? Internal control is nothing but you want to achieve organizational objectives, and to do that, what are the activities you want to do that will help you in accomplishing organizational objective? That is what internal control is. Okay, very simple. So not in the detail as per the standard, but how do you implement this part? Now, how do you implement this part? So first you have to define the internal controls, right? What are internal controls? You already know. It might be policy, process, guidelines, criteria. Before starting any of the assignments, you must prepare the list of the controls you are going to look into. Once you are preparing list of the controls, there will be only two situations. Either the control is already drafted by the management. If yes, you have to see the effectiveness. If control itself does not exist in that area, then you have to have discussion with management that this process is completely premature. You need to first design it. Before even I can audit it, first you have to design it so that assurance can be given. These are the practical aspects. As an auditor, as a chartered accountants or any auditors, you can't always go and start from the controls, because there are these organizations of varying maturities. There are some organizations where you can get everything spick and span in the place and you just go and start reviewing it. There are organizations, and in the recent time when the startup culture is there, if you go and ask any startup that show me your internal controls, the very first thing they will ask that, what does that mean? I'm just starting my company. Which kind of control you are asking from me, right? So first you have to understand that nature of organization, maturity of organization. Once you know that, the next step is that depending on the maturity, what is the level of implementation, internal control that might be deployed at that organization. Once you do that, then you can start the audit to see the effectiveness. And that you, anyway, there are two types of checking you can do it. That is test of design and test of effectiveness. So three parts, whether organization have internal control in place, might be yes, might be no. If yes, then as an auditor, what you want to do, you have to do the test of design and test of effectiveness, and then you have to come out with the recommendations. If this is a startup, you are not going to get anything on internal control in the beginning. So you have to discuss, you have to assess, you have to advise that please go through it, then only you can prepare the internal controls. These are the practical aspects from the implementations. Coming back to risk management, right? No, risk management, I have just only one question, that how many of you do your personal risk management? First of all, unless you can manage your personal risk, you will not be able to manage any organizational risk. Personal risk, home risk at home, risk of your career, then only you can manage the organizational risk, because risk management is an acumen. You just can't go to the theory and just try to implement that, okay, now I have to do this. It has to have in your acumen that how to manage risk. Okay. Once you know that, okay, these are the things you can manage risk, then you can go for the organizational risk management. The very first thing in the theory, it very easily says you must manage risk within risk appetite. But what it doesn't tell you, what is risk appetite and who decides that? So as an internal auditor, if you are going and asking management, okay, guys, show me your risk appetite, you won't get anything. Risk appetite is not just a binary thing that given on the plate. So as an implementation, you have to first discuss that whether they have any structure there. If they have the structure, whether the risk management program framework exists, all the members are nominated, risk management committee exists, and based on that, whatever risk assessment is done, then only you can see that, okay, now that you have already assessed your risk, now that you have already assessed a risk, I can see that whether risks are getting mitigated or not. So coming on to the risk management, little practical example. So you want to become CA, right? All are CA who are attending here. What are the risk management when you enrolled for the CA? So you might have identified the CA whether I will pass or I will fail. If I will pass, how much time and what will I do after passing? If not, then what? So there are different ways to treat the risk. Like if there are some students after clearing foundation on CPT1 or inter, they decided yaar mere se nahi hone wala hai, it's difficult. So what they do, they leave the course, they join some other course. This is called risk avoidance. You don't want to pursue that. You don't want to do CA. So you have completely avoided the risk. Then you want to accept the risk. How will you accept the risk? Then you are taking challenge. Once you are taking challenge, you do so many things that I have to pass finally. And for that, you join some self-study, rigorous self-study, tuition, coaching, and whatnot. What you are trying to do it? You are trying to do that risk reduction. So that by your own effort, so that someday you will become CA, right? If you want to that risk sharing or completely treating the risk, nothing but you have to have CA as a final qualification. There is no something called half CA and full CA. If you want to completely treat the risk, go a full blown, earn your CA degree, and that is your final risk taking. So this is just, I'm giving you the practical example, how you can manage the risk, but how it is done in organization, I will tell you. So this is again little theory, but you need to convert this into practical. So all the processes of organizations, they are studied. And then we have a risk management committee, risk owners, entire risk framework are in the place. So you need to understand that which kind of risks are there and what are the different kind of risk. It might be strategic, it might be tactical, operational, or reputational risk. Then you might have decided that framework, okay, let me assess it. Let me rank all the risk. So every company does in the different way. So one example I'm giving you that you have done in the high, serious, medium, or low. There might be only high, medium, low. There might be critical, minor, major. There might be different jargons you can say. So you have to take one approach by which approach you want to assess your risk. Okay. What do you do the next? So this is a standard graph. You do X and Y. What is that X and Y? Risk impact and risk frequency. Why risk impact is on X-axis and why frequency in Y-axis. So by your basic maths, you understand that all the Y-axis are dependent variables and all the X-axis are independent variables, right? So frequency, you can't decide that tsunami, how many times tsunami will come. You are not going to decide that. But if tsunami comes, what is the impact? So impact is anyway there on the X-axis. You can't control the impact. But why tsunami comes, what I can do in the ecosystem that it comes little late frequency. These are the dependent variables. So depending on that, you have to categorize all your risk into organization also. That if something Forex, how the Forex market will behave, how my competitors are behaving. You have done complete risk management for your existing product, but something what is happening that your product itself get a complementary product or substitute. Your risk management will not work because customers are able to get different products for serving their own objective where your product doesn't matter there. So your entire risk management framework will go for a toss. That's where strategical risk comes, which talks about the macro level, global risk, country risk, competitor product risk and all. Once you have assessed that, then comes the tactical, then comes the operational and reputational risk. Okay. So nothing much to dwell on that. It's just an practical side of that. How do you pursue? As an internal auditor, what is there to do if the risk management process is existing or not existing? So as per the standards, management had to decide and create a framework to have effective risk management policy. Then what will auditor will do? Auditor has to see that whether management is managing their risk effectively or not. And how do they do that? They have to ask from the management and the risk management professionals or the SPOCs. You show me your last risk grading. You show me the actions taken. You show me if any risk movements are taking place. It's not that your all risk will come up to an acceptable risk. However, as an internal auditor from deployment point of view, you need to understand that whether management is making an effort to control the risk. That's what an auditor can do. Okay. Then just some example that technology risk, you have a completely changed technology. Now Nokia is nowhere. You never know that a mobile phone can replace the camera. Now, so that is called technology risk. Regulatory risk. Some regulation has come that Vedanta and other, that you can't have at this emission level, you can't operate a plant. Regulatory risk. He has to close their plant in the south. Off-taker risk. Your customer is no more interested in you. They have stopped their businesses for which you were supplying their input. Nothing. Your business has gone for a toss. ESG, the much buzzword right now that ESG risk, the entire world is discussing on the ESG risk, that COP26, COP27 and all. So whether are you complying toward the ESG risk? Why this is important? If you are not complying towards that, you will not have access to the cheaper capital from the world. Because many financiers, they assess you that what are you doing for the climate, for the ESG domain. Then only you will support you by funding you. As an auditor, what they need to do, auditor has to see for the at the time of implementation, whether all the critical and important risks are covered by the management. And then you can do the review plan, whether ESG is featuring in your audit plan or not. If not, then you are not doing justice with your audit objectives. So how much time I need for doing all these things? You don't need more time. What you need more focus. There is limited budget within all the deployments. So if a standard says that you have to do this, you have to do that, but there is something called resource and budget effective deployment also. Had it been that unlimited resources and deployment budget, you could have treated all your risk. There is no issue. But since you have a resource constraint, budget constraint, you need to prioritize your risk. And that's where auditors need to see that whether there's a company is prioritizing risk and then risk management process is working effectively in that part or not. Okay. So how do you then plan your audit plans? So you have to ensure your completeness of the risk coverage. Why I'm dwelling more time on this risk, that entire audit is now shifting from just mere auditing to a risk-based approach. It's going from the control monitoring to the risk management. So how will you do that? You have to ensure completeness of the risk coverage. Define potential scope of internal audit. These are the practical tasks. You know that as per standard, the organization has to do the risk management process. Now coming back to deployment, whether company or your, target client, they have done the potential scoping and whether that is featuring into internal audit or not. Comprised of auditable entities. If organizations are a conglomerate or many companies, what are your auditable entities? Are you auditing at a company level or a process level or a plant level? That also you need to decide. Then conduct top-down and bottom-up analysis aligned to a strategic objective. So earlier you can have a 3-year rolling plan and we used to do anything. Now that is not working anymore. So what is working then? Every year based on that last year performance and future goals of the organization, you need to align your audit plan with the company strategic objective. You can't make your own plan in random or suo moto without aligning this with the company's objective. So a plan has to be, audit plan has to be aligned to the company's strategy. The risks which are mattering to the company, which matters in the strategy document, that must be covered in your audit plan. So identification of most critical risks. And then review of the key documents. So if you are going to have this engagement done, how will you do that engagement? Then risk unit priority based on the inherent risk and control. Means if company is showing some risk, what is that last time when you audited? Does it qualify for the next year auditing or alternate year auditing? Based on that, you can drive the priorities of frequency of audit. What were your past year observations? Whether that quality of corrective and preventive actions that are getting closed or not. If you are just writing recommendations every time in which management is not interested, how many times you are going to audit the same process? Then you need to change your strategy also. So that's what the practical side I'm telling you, that it's not enough to have a risk management framework or risk listing. You have to assess that whether management is effective and how you can do that. You have to understand the initial inherent risk. With inherent risk never changes. What changes is the residual risk, and how that residual risk changes based on the actions management taking. So you have to always see that whether management is having focus in reducing the inherent risk to the mitigated level. And that's what is called risk appetite, the question I asked in the beginning. So what is risk appetite? Risk appetite is that risk you can bear with all available resources and budget duly signed by the risk management committee and presented to the board. If you are having those documents, that is the risk appetite. It's not that it's my risk appetite and it's your risk appetite. You have to always think in form of the what is organizational risk appetite. So these are the things you need to focus while auditing the practical side of the risk management framework, that whether risk appetite is duly formulated and discussed and approved in the RMC. Then only you can take it further. Then you have to also see that feasibility of the risk assessment of previous audit that already covered. Now coming back to governance, that is the most difficult part. Can somebody write what is the meaning of governance in the chat box? So in all 12 languages, if you go and see, the meaning of governance is nothing but a sasan. But that doesn't take place in the organization. You can't do sasan on all the auditee and the corporate senior staff, senior members, audit committee and all. So though the Hindi, Telugu, Tamil, Marathi, Gujarati, all the language, they define governance as sasan. In reality, it doesn't happen sasan, but you need to create a co-create environment of mutual respect and understanding. You just can't do the sasan with and run the internal audit department like that. Okay, so how the governance is defined? Governance is defined as a state of relationship between the company and its various stakeholders and provide a structure through which the company objectives are achieved. So it's not that some fine day you come and okay, tell me how your governance document is there. It's no. It has to be created with a relationship of all the affected parties and stakeholders. Then only you will be able to command respect and govern the internal audit as a whole. Then governance ensures that everyone is aligned to the best interest of the organization and does not they are supposed to do to help achieve their own objectives. Means it's not that my governance or your governance or internal audit governance. Governance at the corporate level, at the client level, which binds all the stakeholders towards the common objective of the, right? Okay, so then what is formal governance framework? Well, practical aspects. So now that you know governance, as per standard, there are two things are given. A standard does not tell you that you need to go there and design and conduct all the audit procedure with a view to highlight any exposure arising from the absent governance activity. Then there is no governance there. As an internal auditor, practical side, you need to understand that you have to plan and perform audit procedure to evaluate the design and implementation operative effectiveness of existing governance framework. In most of the cases, you don't find any existing governance framework. Then how will you audit that? Then the standard says that you don't need to go and draft entire governance by yourself. You need to discuss with affected parties and stakeholders and management that, hey, going forward for a better running of your organizations, you and we need to have a set of document called governance. That is the starting point. Once that is there, then only your audit review and other thing can start. Then any shortcomings shall result in recommendations of the improvement and suggestion on how to make the governance framework more efficient. So providing independent assurance. That is the internal auditor part, practical deployment, and not that going and designing everything for the management. So you don't have to assume responsibility of managing governance framework. There are so many stakeholders, audit committees are there, chairmen are there, executive management are there. You have to just give the independent assurance that whether this framework is effective, is not effective, and whether it is aligned to the organization objective, it can help in achieving their goals or not. Okay, any example on the governance that you don't need to see, I will write all the SOP and execute it. SOP you can't write. You can have a delegation of authority guidance, but you don't go and write in the behalf of the management all the SOPs and then start auditing that also written by this same person. So these are the things one need to keep in mind while deploying the effectiveness of the practical side on the governance in this. Then coming to the compliance with laws and regulations. Now standard tells that who has to do what. What is the auditor has to do. In our earlier session, you have already seen which types of regulations. So compliance also covers regulations, rules, standards, transparency with all the user of your document, requirements, policy, and all. Now, the nature and extent of internal audit procedure to be conducted in the area of compliance is dependent on the framework in place and the maturity of the process. So what is a formal compliance? It's a very big words written in the standard. But if I say you that as an internal auditors, how are you giving assurance that company is complying with all the law or not? There comes the deployment part. You have to have some tools or some systems at place to monitor, to assist you, basis which you can give some reasonable assurance that yes, compliance framework is there or not. So what are the tools available or what do we use? So most of the clients now they are using Ligatrix. So you have to understand that whether company has deployed any tool to monitor their compliances. If yes, whether the tool is already design of the tool and POC has been done, how frequently the tool is getting updated, who has the control on the tool, who can upload the document, is it mandatory to upload the required documents or is just a checkbox? Without doing anything, I am just attaching the first page of income tax return without doing anything and it is compliant. And as an internal auditor, you are just seeing the report and you are also giving the assurance that it is complied. No. Then what are the different mechanisms that auditor needs to devise? That whatever tools that is implemented are able to reliable basis their report and functioning, you can give some positive assurance, some reasonable assurance. Many a time even the tool directly cannot be deployed at all the sites or plants or at a global level. Then what are the other methods, other mechanism that you are devising and sharing with management that you have to report in this format? In this format, this feature should be there, and also mandatorily all the documents can be added in the or uploaded in the shared folder, where you can go and see that whether required documents are available. So it's not only that if tool is not there, you can't give any assurance to the compliance. No, one has to devise that what are the other alternatives basis which you can give the assurance on the compliance. So in our case, we are operating from the 12 different states, 130 plus sites, and it takes time to implement any compliance tool for any company. As an internal auditor, if somebody asks that how are you giving assurance, so please give me assurance. Can I say that since you have not implemented any tool, I can't give you any assurance? No. So what do we do as a practical side? So we have framed a Excel version of that. We have given the shared folder to the auditee. We have defined the dates. They have to upload all the relevant documents to that folder. Once the period is closed, we go and recheck it. Basis that we give the reasonable assurance that whether this is done, this is not done. What is no formal compliances? The internal auditor shall plan and perform internal audit procedures to evaluate the design, implementation, and operating effectiveness of such framework so as to provide independent assurance to them. So this independent assurance can be given if tool is implied, it's easy, it will support you. If tool is not implemented, then you need to do some smart work, you need to do some more work on that. What is no formal compliance? The internal auditor shall design and conduct audit procedure. Shall design and conduct audit procedure. This word, please mind that internal auditors should not be designing, right? That compliance procedure, that what audit needs to be done, because compliance is neither made by the internal auditor nor by auditee. It is mandated by the law. You should not change the law just for the sake of easy compliances. And when your third party audit is being there, then you are saying, oh, we are not compliant, this is mistake, right? So you should avoid from that. The issuance of audit paper, they shall be undertaken in line with the okay. So we have already know that if you are taking the assignment where we need to do or give audit opinion, then your complete checklist, work paper, detailed engagement plan, everything has to be at the of different level. Okay, so now how do we implement all the standards, whatever we have gone through until now, right from nature of assurance to the compliance? So there is something called PDCA. What is PDCA? If anyone is interested in writing in the checkbox, what is PDCA? So many of you have written it correctly, but what happens in the practical, that you have so much, I'm telling you the practical side, you are so much under pressure or tremendous pressure that of the timeline. Actually what you do, that please do not check anything. That's how in most of the cases it happens, that PDCA in the real life. Please don't go in that side. Plan, do, check and act. You need to do everything before planning, that how the standard, what are the requirements, how this can be implemented. So planning is the first phase. If you see Indian context and other context, what we do, we are just doing 10% planning and 90% rework. You can't implement, and then after that you do everything in the hurriedness. You have to have at least 60 to 70% time in the planning. Well plan is half done, well beginning is half done. So first we understand the requirement, and that is the then do. So first shot, okay, normally doesn't happen. So once you have planned, you are trying to deploy it. Mostly it will not come 100% accurate at the first go. So that's why there's something called check. You check and then take it from the 60% to 70%, 70% to 90%, closer to that. And after that, what you do? Act. And this is the cycle. This is not a straight line that you start from plan, do, check, act, and finish. There's nothing called finish in this PDCA cycle. That's why it is cycle. It's not a straight path that you have a start and you have a end. You start and finish. It's not like CA foundation ho gaya, inter ho gaya, final ho gaya, done. That is only your first step as a CA. If you want to excel in the CA also, what do you do after CA and before CA? After CA, you need to decide that what is my life objective. There are so many fields in CA you can make career. It start with taxation, internal audit, finance, treasury, international transfer pricing, international financing. There are so many areas. So then you plan that what you actually want to become after CA. You need to choose for that. You need to work toward that. You need to check that whether your initial interest and final interest are they on the same line. If not, there are many people who changes their track after that. These are the difficulties from the implementation side. Once implemented doesn't mean that it is implemented forever. You need to understand that the world is very dynamic. Every time you have to keep on monitoring this, visualizing this, and then only effective planning can come. Now, as an auditor, what are the real challenges come in the implementations in the real corporate life? Though the standards say that it's internal audit and the standards of internal audit, but gradually, if you come to the industry and then you will realize that internal audit itself is an oxymoron. It is internal also and audit also. How both the things can survive together. But yes, to survive this both the things, we have a framework, we have a standard. So you have to educate your stakeholders that I am abiding by these standards of the institute. These are the best practice guidelines that will help you in getting out of this oxymoron. That is the first challenge, that how to be part of the system and remain independent also. This is the most specific challenge of the internal auditor. Then your stakeholder management. You are going to advise a persons who are supposed to be expert in their own area. Internal audit mostly is a generalistic profiles many times. And then you are going to suggest experts that these things need to be done in this way or that way. Unless you have a trust with the stakeholders, nobody is going to listen to you. So for effective implementation, you have to have a very good trust level with the stakeholders. If they trust you, they will support you, they will tell few things. And how internal audit survives then? Internal audit survives because they see the things from the external angle. And if you just change your lenses, even for anything, you will definitely come out with few suggestions, few good suggestions. And that's where the strength of internal audit lies. But this can be only helpful if your stakeholder partner trust you. Otherwise, they are not going to accept anything. So I think it's 10 minutes before, but that's how effective implementation is done. So I will be closing here and I will be taking a pause and I will stop sharing and open for all the questions and answers, if any. Thank you.
To Amrendra. I was just going through the Q&A section. I don't think there are any questions that have come till now. We'll wait for another 1 minute for the questions to come before we
Sure.
close the session.
Sure.
So I would request all the participants to write in as many questions as they want to write and utilize this opportunity. So yeah, there is one question, sir.
Okay, let me go to that section. How can we independent and still maintain stakeholder management? That's the question. That's what I was mentioning there. That this is the place where your standards, guidelines issued by the institute, regulation by the law, that will come to your rescue. That you have to educate your stakeholder that you have to abide by these ethics, these standards, this compliance, and then only you can be independent and have a effective stakeholder management. Where can we go checklist for the said SIA? You need to discuss with your partners or experience firm because these are just the standards. But for every standards, if you have gone to the earlier session, there are ways and means to implement it. And you can develop based on this questionnaire. You can discuss with your senior or industry expert, and you will get that. What are the data analytics software used for internal audit? There are so many to name. You can use the IDEA, you can do the R, you can have your own data lake, and you can have your own botnet. There are many applications in digital age. They are available for the data analytics. We normally use the R, and we have used the data lake based on some earlier tool we developed in-house, basis which we presented in the Institute of Internal Audit conferences and won twice in the 2017 and 2023 for the same. So there are enough tool available. You just need to understand that what do you want to do. There is no dearth of tools in this artificial intelligence and digital era. You need to be very clear what you want to achieve. Then only you can be in a position to select a good tool. I am a statutory auditor of the company. If the internal auditor does not give proper report, then it's your right as per the standard that if you don't believe in the work of the internal auditor, or if you don't find it satisfactory, you have the right to re-audit again. You can also comment in your section that you did not find internal audit and control system of the company to the satisfactory level. Is SIA mandatory? As of now, these are the framework we have to operate for a good audit report. I think still they are the draft. Is there any format of corporate governance framework which can be used as a reference? There is no one size fits all. Yes, you can take a general guideline. Basis that the company you are working for, or the company or scale or size you are looking into, you can develop one. RCM is responsible to internal department of a company. Yes, unless you have the risk and control matrix, unless you understand the risk, how are you going to assess with the help of the audit to the auditee? What should be our mindset for internal audit to be confident? Your knowledge, your belief that you are better than the best. Then only you can do the internal audit. Internal audit is an attitude. It's not only the normal degree or a qualification. You have to have that attitude. In India, what is important? SIA or IPPF standards from the GIS rule January 25. IPPF is the guidelines issued by CIA, IIA, Institute of Internal Auditors. I think in the similar line, our SIA are also developed. So while in India, SIA is much to be followed, but both the principles are having the similar line. If a company does not have documented risk management framework, what should auditor do? Reject the assignment or report that framework is inadequate. You must start with that framework is inadequate, but at the same time, you can help audit and management to make them understand that what needs to be done and what they can do henceforth. The rejection of the assignment is not the solution unless it's a pure and pure assurance assignment where you are not confident. All assignments are not assurance nature that you have to give reasonable assurance. How SIA are making change the way of internal audit are working is now not making any changes, but it's giving you more practices and more tools that if you work as per the standards, it will bring consistency across all your work, whatever you do. How AI can be used in internal audit? So AI and IA, artificial intelligence and internal audit, I can't say that you just reverse the AI with IA, it will be used. You need to do something with that since it is artificial intelligence, first you know that what naturally you need. What do you want? Then you have to go for the artificial things. There are many tools available for that. And the very basic concept that you don't need to have all the AI tools within internal audit. You can leverage all the AI being used by your stakeholder, your partner and all, that what kind of output or outcomes they are getting with their AIs and how this can help you in doing better internal audit. Kansha, any more you want?
I think there is one question that is coming repeatedly.
Yeah.
Can we not draft SOPs for management and also perform the audit of that area for which SOP is drafted?
Two sessions. Ideally, you should not draft. Then what? You have a pressure to the organizations also. You can always help them, but don't sign the SOP. Once you have signed the SOP, it will be a conflict. You will not be able to audit your signed SOP. But you can always guide them. You can always give benefit of your own experience in particular area. That how an SOP should be drafted, what all it should constitute. But don't sign that. You can help, definitely help them. Don't take the ownership.
Okay. So there are two more that I can see. One, if I'm not a CA, can I work in internal audit team?
Very much. Even the standards also allow that anybody can be internal auditor, be CA, CMA, or any person of the requisite financial knowledge that board understands. You can be internal, working in the internal.
Okay. Why internal audit standards are not mandatory in nature?
That needs to be discussed separately.
Okay. As new internal auditor, where can we get tools or formats for effective internal audit assignment?
Yeah, so if you are having any experience or working in a particular type of industry, if you discuss with your counterpart, every industry, every process, every assignments, if you are talking to the right people, you will get ready RCM, ready tool and ready framework. It's only that you have to leverage your social media and networking. That where I can waste the best resource for any assignment.
Okay. So I think we've covered all the questions. Yeah, there are no new questions now. So we should be able to close. So I see Akanksha Singh on behalf of WIRC and all the participants would like to extend a great thank you, sir, for time and making time for us and taking this session. It was truly insightful. Also, I really like how you put the analogy of CA course, identification of CA course with the risk management, and we went through all the steps. So that was really very, it was unique and it really helped to understand the concept. So that was really nice. Apart from many other things, I have noted a lot of things, governance, the PDCA cycle. I think even I have worked into internal audit, but these small things, I think we generally skip. We don't pay attention to these things. But I think it will really add a lot of value to our work when we go back to work using this knowledge. So I would really like to thank you for sparing your time. And yeah, that's it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.